faith, family, and everything else that matters to you from a godly point of view. Welcome to the Clearbranch Methodist Podcast.
Hey, welcome in. It is the Clearbranch Methodist Podcast. My name is Mark Harvard. I am the pastor of communications and online campus for Clearbranch Methodist Church in Trussville, Alabama. Thanks for joining us this week as we take time out to kind of commiserate a little bit with all of the folks, myself included, my appointments next week with the accountant to get together and submit all of our tax forms. And because that's kind of where I'm living right now, I decided to get one of the smartest, numerically businessy brained people I know, who also shares an office wall with me, to come in and talk about it. It's our executive pastor, David Shelton. David, thanks for being here this week.
Oh, thanks for having me, Mark. And obviously, you don't know very many people if I'm one of the smartest you know. So, or at least in this arena.
You're the smartest that shares an office wall with me, though.
Oh, that narrows it down quite a bit.
Although, don't let Sharon hear me say that.
Exactly. Exactly.
David, I've been trying to, figure out a way to get you into the podcast since we started doing this.
That's mainly because nothing I do is interesting, right?
Well, you're so busy. You do everything around here, around the church. I mean, you end up, if a door breaks, David, come do this. If a vent needs to be changed, David, do this. If we've got to apply for a grant, David, can you help with this? Youth is out, youth leaders out. David, take youth. I mean, you're kind of like, you're the Swiss Army knife of this church.
Well, that just means I am not really good at anything. I can just do a lot of things adequately.
You do things a lot more adequately than I am. Most of the things you do, nobody, myself included, wants me doing.
Well, they usually don't want me doing it. It's just it falls to me.
I would trade most of the offering every week for magic beans.
Yes.
And call that a good investment. Which is why, my wife, she's an MBA. We let her pay the bills.
Absolutely.
And do the bookkeeping because nobody wants me doing that. Least of all the government.
Well, yeah, the government might not appreciate the magic beans in payment. So,
well, how do you document that? Do you get a receipt? Most time, these roadside guys with selling these things don't have the proper permits.
Yeah,
it's a big quagmire.
Receipts are really strange for that.
Yeah, there you go, David. So, a lot of people are in the next few weeks, if they haven't done it already, are going to be getting all that paperwork together, all those receipts, all those W-2s, and all the different things. And it's stressful going in. It's stressful if you do it yourself. God bless you. I turned my taxes over to an accountant years ago, and I never looked back because I've gotten audited once.
Yeah,
and it was because I was doing a whole lot of freelance work. I was doing a ton of that sort of stuff, and that freelancing is just a magnet.
Oh,
for audits. And the account that I have, also an old family friend, she actually took it personally. She was like, I got the letter, I called her, she said, come by, I've got a couple of forms for you to sign. You'll never hear about this again.
She sounds like a woman we should all know.
Yes. Miss Judy is awesome. So as we're going into this, David, I need you to help me resolve in my heart all the money that I'm going to have to pay. Because I'm sure I've mixed up something and not had enough taken out, or whatever. I need you to help me on a spiritual level resolve this.
Yeah, I get it. Everyone has to pay taxes in some form or another, and I can honestly say I don't know anyone that actually enjoys that. And
there's something wrong with you if you do.
Absolutely,
right?
You're in a very narrow category if you enjoy it. But on the spiritual side, it's actually something that Scripture speaks to a decent amount. There is a decent amount said in both the Old Testament and the New Testament about taxes, or at least the concept of them. And so, when you think taxes or tax collectors and Scripture, you're oftentimes thinking about the bad guys in the New Testament, we're familiar with all these stories of the tax collectors being evil and all, and that has a lot to do with the fact that the tax collectors in the New Testament were these guys that were working for the Romans, who were the occupiers. And so it was local guys that were working for the bad guys. So that's kind of where that idea came about. But when you think about it, there's some pretty famous guys in Scripture that were tax collectors.
I know one.
Yeah. Who would that be?
Matthew,
actually one of the apostles. And also one of the, another guy was one of the greatest stories or children's songs that you ever learned in church, Zacchaeus.
Yeah.
These are guys who were tax collectors by occupation and followers of Jesus. So, how does that work out? How do you?
And they were lowly
that?
regarded, right?
Oh.
I mean, these weren't the people that got invited to everything.
No, the general public really despised these guys.
They were viewed as traitors.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's these lowest of the low guys. And, Jesus actually says a little bit about that. There's actually a spot in Scripture in Luke 18 where Jesus is speaking directly to tax collectors, people who were coming to follow him, who were tax collectors, who were this group of people who everybody really despises.
Yeah.
Well, they probably had done some stuff to be despised about. They were probably collecting a little bit more than they should, padding their pockets a little bit. But Jesus specifically talks to these people who are coming to follow him, and he doesn't say, stop collecting taxes. He says, don't collect more than you're supposed to. So it's like taxes are a given. And then there's also, a really famous spot where Jesus is asked by the religious leaders, should we be paying these taxes to the Romans? And Jesus asks for a coin and says, okay, wait, whose face is this on here? And it's Caesar's. And he says, there you go. Give to Caesar the things that are Caesar's. Give to God the things that are God's. And so Jesus wasn't just saying, hey, taxes are not a bad thing. He was saying, they're expected. They're an obligation. It's not just lawful to pay them, but it's obligatory. And so Jesus didn't have a negative view of taxes per se. Now, tax collectors, that's kind of an iffy thing. But so we're not talking about the IRS agents right now.
No, and it went beyond the job that they were doing.
Exactly.
He had a few things against some tax collectors, but it had nothing to do with the job that they were hired to do and that aspect of it. It's what they did above and beyond.
Absolutely. These tax collectors, they were actually coming to be baptized by Jesus. I said earlier Luke 18. That's actually in Luke 2 where it's that case. What I was going to say in Luke 18. But it's still about tax collectors in Luke 18, because in Luke 18, that's where we have the story that Jesus talks about a Pharisee and a tax collector. The Pharisee is a big religious guy, both going to the temple to pray. And it's the tax collector who's normally the bad guy, who Jesus talks about being humble and realizing that he's not been great and asking God for forgiveness. We have the Pharisee kind of praying for show and saying, look, I follow you, God. Thank you for making me great who I am. And so Jesus is actually kind of juxtaposing turning the whole concept of the tax collector and the religious leader on its ear and saying the tax collector is the one's justified. So we have this really negative concept of tax collectors because that's how they're presented oftentimes. That's how it's talked about. The tax collectors were the bad guys. But oftentimes, the tax collectors were the ones who realized, maybe I haven't been who I need to be. Maybe I haven't been collecting the right thing. Maybe I haven't been treating people correctly. But never in any of these cases is there something negative said about the taxes being paid.
No.
So the taxes are not a bad thing. Now, none of us like April 15th to roll around. None of us like the idea of giving a lot of that money, that's marked FICA on our check stubs.
One day I'm going to find that FICA guy.
Oh, absolutely. But it's not fun to pay taxes, but there's reasons for it. And in Scripture, those reasons come out. Paul talks about in Romans that you pay taxes to the authorities, and that's what you need to do, because when they're working the way they're supposed to, technically they're working for God. Even though it's not a job specifically for God or for the church or something like that, God has put order in place. And part of what's needed for order are some of these funds. You wouldn't be having things like, roads. You wouldn't be having, aqueducts in their time, or our water system.
It's like that scene from The Life of Brian.
Yes.
What have the Romans ever given us? The aqueducts.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Aside from that.
You got us on that.
Roads. Oh, the roads are nice.
Yeah. Well, and that's funny to talk about, but the whole idea of this Roman culture that the New Testament is all written in, it's all about Rome spreading what Rome is, and they called it the Pax Romana, or the Roman peace. The only way that peace happened was the organization that included things like roads and aqueducts and keeping the peace and police forces in a certain concept. It was actually usually soldiers, but keeping the peace.
Yeah.
And so there's money that's needed to be able to do those things, and that's what taxes go to. And even when we go way back in the Old Testament, the idea of a tithe was originally somewhat of a tax, because this 10%, which there was a lot more than 10% that was prescribed to be given.
Sure.
But there was 10% that it was only used to support the priest and the tabernacle. And
It
that
was simple operating costs.
Yeah, that wasn't even for public works. That was operating cost. So taxes, as gross as they are to pay, are a necessary thing, and Scripture is pretty plain that that's how it works.
Well, and also, I think that you end up, there's the negative side of it from a spiritual point of view. It's what goes beyond what it takes, when it goes beyond what is necessary. When Jesus did speak out against, you mentioned it wasn't the people, it wasn't the taxes themselves, it was the behavior surrounding them. When you involve, the people involved, it's when it goes beyond and gets into greed, and I mean greed for money, greed for power. When you start factoring in the old Pharisees, but it's that added negative humanity that goes along with it. It's not the actual payment that we're supposed to give. It's when it it gets totally blown up to feed someone else's greed.
Yeah, and that's what Jesus was talking about when he was telling the tax collectors, don't collect more than what you're supposed to.
Exactly.
Because that was where the greed and the pat in your pockets came in. But you have to understand that who he was speaking to there was the tax collector. He wasn't telling the rank and file, just Joe Public, guys, don't pay a tax if it's not justified. That wasn't up to them.
Yeah, because that's the law.
Yeah, exactly.
Of the day that you did that.
Now, we have lots of ways to maybe address that in this country at this time, through voting and things like that. But ultimately, the taxes that are levied by the government, whether we like them or not, even if we don't necessarily like what they're going to, we don't have any scriptural precedent to not pay them.
Yeah.
So I realize that may be stepping on a few toes. That may be a little bit uncomfortable. But ultimately, Jesus talks a lot about being the person you're supposed to be, living the way you're supposed to live, and even living under the authority of those who are put in place governmentally, not just in religious areas.
Can you imagine the quagmire of chaos? Which, by the way, is a fantastic band name, and I call it.
Is that the guy on King of the Hill?
But can you imagine the absolute chaos that would come from if we got to pay our taxes a la carte?
Oh yeah,
because yes, it would keep us from paying for programs we didn't agree with, but there'd always be those folks that learn how to cheat the system, and it would be so in and out.
You think your tax forms are long now?
Oh my gosh, everything would have to be just totally explain every cent.
I need Form 1040 XYZHYK.
Yes. Pertaining to.
Yes, exactly.
Me say I want to fund roads. I want to fund police. Check. I'm just going to guess I don't need a fire department this year. So no, I'm not going to fund them.
I only want to fund roads in my neighborhood. I only want to fund what benefits me. Well, that's really not even a Christian concept. The whole idea is it's not about us.
Yeah.
Let's consider other people as more important than ourselves. You know, in the Old Testament, the law said, don't harvest all the way out to the edges of your field, so that those who are poor and those who are traveling will be able to be supported. So the idea of social consciousness and social help, that's actually part of God's law. Now, whether or not our current government's doing it in that aspect, that's up for debate. But the concept really does come through Scripture.
Well, and you can go either side of the aisle on your thought process on this, and because even as a Christian tenet, it gets politicized, so much to the point where it is exhausting. But no matter which side of the aisle you're on, we all feel that pull to help other people.
I hope we do.
Yeah. So, it's the discussion, the disagreement is, should we be required to or not?
Yes, exactly. Well, and not to fall on one side or the other, at least as the church, we're pretty much required to.
Yeah.
It's the mechanism for that's up for debate.
Yeah.
But we need to be considering kind of what Jesus said. How do we take care of others? How do we help the poor, the sick, the needy? That's what Jesus was all about.
And that enables us, that is enabled by the paying of taxes to a point.
Yeah.
It should be.
None of us want to agree with that, but that's kind of the thing.
That's how we're able to afford to do some of this,
Absolutely.
And I'm not saying things, money isn't wasted. We've all seen the $400 hammer.
Yes, exactly. The gold toilet seat.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's in Elvis's bathroom, though.
Oh, that's true.
Pay for that. But yeah. Well, I guess some of us did. My mom was a big Elvis fan. I'm sure some of her records and stuff.
Yeah. Did you pay to go to Graceland?
I did once.
Yeah.
That's one of those. It's one of those places I really only need to go once.
Oh, absolutely. But
it felt icky
for a lot of people. It's a bucket list thing.
Yeah. That'll be my house one day.
There you go. I see them lining up at the Harvard residence.
Also known as Crime Scene A.
Yes, that. Pay no attention to the chalk outlines on the floor.
Why is this one shaped like a cat? Oh, David, you do everything around here. Now you are the executive pastor.
So are you blaming me here?
I am not. I'm saying that we survive in spite of.
Oh, okay.
So, but you're the executive pastor here at Clearbranch, and you handle a lot of our tax stuff, or at least getting our tax stuff too. And lately, you've been handling the rest of our finances because we had some staff illness.
Yeah.
So you've been all up in our numbers. You brought me a reimbursement check earlier today.
Yeah. Don't look at it. It's not right.
Fantastic.
I taxed it.
Oh, you jerk. Why? That was money I used to help someone.
Okay. Yeah. We'll go with that.
But I say all that to say that you kind of have your finger on the pulse of the church's of the numbers of the church these days. And so I guess my question for you with that, knowing all of that is where do we stand as a church with our giving to needy causes? That's such a generic term. But where do we stand when it comes to helping out other people?
Well, one thing I'm really proud about what Clearbranch is kind of known for, we've been able to help individuals oftentimes with specific needs, help people out of tough situations. But then there's a lot broader context that we do as well through ministry to the homeless, through one of our greatest mission partners is a mission project in India that's a school and semi-orphanage. It's not really an orphanage, but it's a place that takes care of kids from a very needy area. And we have lots of folks individually in the church that sponsor kids there. Yeah, absolutely.
That picture on my wall. Right?
Exactly. But there are lots of different avenues through which people are helped. We help through Project Independence, which is helping people that may have a hard time getting by on their own. We help with mothers who have had to leave difficult marriages or home life situations for their own protection. Yes. There are just so many areas that we try to help out, and that's in addition to just the everyday in and out of doing the work that we're trying to do and trying to make sure that we're being good stewards of what we're given. Ultimately, it comes down to considering others as more important than ourselves, which is kind of circles all the way back around to what we talked about at the first.
There you go. There you go. And, we have our amount we're supposed to pay the government. We also have the tithing amount that we're supposed to give to help the church run and go above and beyond. And so it all comes, I guess, from the same bank account, but it's also all for, I guess, in that mindset of being for the greater good.
Yeah, the same
things
way.
That are bigger than us.
Absolutely. Working with paying taxes to the government. Like we said before, Jesus advocated that, and he said to do it because people wouldn't be in power if God hadn't set that up and allowed it.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. Well, by the same token, he set up the church, and he set up the concept of giving within that framework so that we can continue to carry out his mission, whether that be helping those who are in need physically, those who are in need certainly spiritually, which is really a much bigger need.
Absolutely.
But when we consider our tithing, our above and beyond gifts, that's doing God's work and entrusting it to the people who have been commissioned to be those hands and feet, to help others to be the hands and feet. It's also that we're all part of a greater plan that's much bigger than any one of us.
Very well said. David, thank you so much for being here this
week.
Thanks
for having
me.
It's
been fun. And David's in his office if you want to come learn more about the financial ins and outs of Clearbranch.
I'm sure everyone's really interested in that.
You know what? Okay, I'm encouraging you all reach out to him and ask so many questions.
Thank you, Mark.
I mean, bother him. He's such a nice guy. David's so nice. He won't let you know that he's actually like really, really busy.
I wish you could see his eyes rolling right now.
Oh, you're a passive-aggressive sweetheart, David. So, all right, that does it for this week on the Clearbranch Methodist Podcast. Don't forget, go find us over on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter. We're or X now. Yeah, that's right. I've got to change signs again. And then also over on TikTok. So go find us all those places, like and share and do whatever appropriate interaction is for each individual platform. I will see you next time right here on the Clearbranch Methodist Podcast.